Welcome to Paranormal Heart Podcast with host Kat Ward. Welcome to Paranormal Heart Podcast, Paranormal Talk with Heart and Soul. Tonight's segment is pre-recorded on United Public Radio Network 107.7 New Orleans, 105.3 the Gulf Coast, YouTube, Spotify, and any place you find your favorite podcast. So just a reminder, if you haven't grabbed your tickets yet for the second annual Gatineau, Ottawa Sasquatch Conference here in Canada on August 15th and 16th, now's the time. Limited tickets are selling fast. This event has grown tremendously in just 1 year, and this year's lineup is bigger and better than last year. Featured speakers include Kevin Tracy, Peter Smith, Ron Crypto Guru Murphy, Tina and Lindsay Cote, Sunbow True Brother, Ken Gerhardt, and many, many more. So including yours truly. I'll be there as well. So if you're passionate about Sasquatch, the unexplained, and connecting with an incredible community, you won't want to miss this. Check out the link in the show notes to secure your spot. I really hope to see you there. So my dear Haunted Hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. For segment 87, I'm joined by Dr. Judd Burton. Dr. Burton is a researcher, author, and explorer known for his work in animalistic cryptozoology and ancient mysteries. Founder of the Institute of Exoconsciousness, he studies the intersection of consciousness, the paranormal, and hidden history, and has authored several books on unexplained phenomena and human origins. And he also has many very interesting courses available online. So tonight we delve into the mysteries of the vampire. So please help me welcome Dr. Judd Burton. Hello.
Hello, Kat. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's really nice to see you. Well, kind of. Nice to speak with you.
Sure. Just one point of correction before we get started.
Yes.
The Institute is actually the Institute of Biblical Anthropology.
Oh, I do apologize for that.
No.
Okay.
That's okay. No problem.
I appreciate the correction.
Yeah, let's talk vampires.
Definitely, yeah. So what first drew you to the vampire mystery, and how did this project begin?
Well, my interest in vampires is long-standing. As a kid, I was always fascinated with ancient mythology and folklore and the human past in general. And my family did a lot to foster that interest because we always had books, and my grandmother was the librarian in town. So
nice.
Basically the public library in town was sort of my personal intellectual playground as a kid. And so I read a lot about those topics in her collection. And, just sort of, I suppose part of the interest is just from the fascination of watching the old Hammer Studio Dracula movies with Christopher Lee.
Yes.
And I remember one actually it was actually the year that Coppola produced or directed Bram Stoker's Dracula. Saw the movie, and that Christmas I asked for nothing but books on vampires and the historical Dracula, and my parents, being the understanding people that they were, indulged me. And there were a couple of books on vampire folklore, and then my dad got me a book called Dracula, Prince of Many Faces by two Boston University historians, Ratty Florescu and Raymond McNally. And of course, this was solely about the historical Dracula. Mm. And it changed the way that I thought about certainly the past in general, but specifically how history was done. Not so much folklore or ethnography, but how it was really the first book that I paid attention to the footnotes, and that's how I figured out, oh, this is how you do history. you learn the languages, and you delve into the primary source documents. So it was a valuable text, not just for the entertainment and information value, but also in terms of where my academic career would actually take me, because I did end up getting a PhD in history, and so yeah, the interest has been longstanding throughout the course of my life.
It's been a very fascinating topic for myself as well, ever since I was very young. And I think my two favorite movies were with Bela Lugosi and the Francis Ford Coppola one. That was the cinematography was amazing in that movie. It was really, really good. At least I found.
I did too. It's amazing that movie is shot largely on a soundstage.
Wow, I didn't realize that. So how far back do vampire legends truly go?
Well, my suspicion is that they're as old as humanity, at least as old as our religious consciousness, I suppose you might say, our religious awareness. The oldest written records that we have about such creatures are from Mesopotamia. But that's not to say that those ideas didn't exist, or the fear of those kinds of creatures didn't exist in much, much earlier societies. Anywhere you find a cult of the dead as part of the religious ideology of the people, you're likely to find an iteration of the vampire. And we find these in even in the earliest, what we could now dub as city-states, places like the Natufian Jericho that dates back to the 10th millennium BC, or even the Tos Templar sites like Göbekli Tepe, reveal these kind of cults of the dead, and perhaps even bloodletting and blood sacrifice that were involved. So that, along with the storehouse of things like rock art that we have all over the world, give us some insight into the mindset and the spiritual supernatural fears that our forebears had. But circling back to Mesopotamia, although cuneiform is the best example that we have of the oldest writing, there may be other alphabets that predate it. The Da Vinci letters in southeastern Europe are a contender. I know that they've recently uncovered new evidence in the Indus River Valley that some of those sites date to before the 4th millennium BC. At any rate, Mesopotamian literature is replete with a host of all kinds of demons. Amongst those are things like the Akimu, or the Adimu, which is probably one of the older kinds of vampiric entities that existed in Mesopotamian literature and mythology. And keeping in mind, these are probably, although the names end up as Sumerian and Akkadian, these are probably much older, because the Sumerians themselves, who were arguably the mother culture of civilized Mesopotamia, did not themselves actually originate in modern Iran, in Mesopotamia. They were a non-Semitic people, probably from the region of the Caucasus Mountains. There's linguistic evidence to suggest that's the case, and so what we're looking at that finally gets written down in Mesopotamian accounts are entities that these people have believed in for God knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
By this point, millennia, certainly. The Lamashtu is another interesting vampire creature from Mesopotamian lore.
Can you repeat that name again? I don't think I've heard of that
Yeah,
one.
the Lamashtu, they're bullheaded, winged-looking creatures. They're sometimes seen as gate guardians, but they also have an appetite for blood. People may be familiar with, probably most familiar with the Lilu or Lilith in the form of Lilith, as a vampire creature who also is found not only in Mesopotamian literature but shows up in a number of passages in the Bible, not the least of which is Isaiah chapter 34. She shows up in the Proverbs and Psalms too. But the Lilith was a night demon who fed largely on the blood and flesh of children. So these are, and of course the Mesopotamians had scores of incantations and spells to try and keep these things at bay. But if you're looking for the oldest source material for recording either beliefs in or instances of vampirism, then the Mesopotamians have the oldest.
Are there lesser known cultures with vampire-like entities that might have surprised you, or?
Yes. Don't know that I would say they're lesser known cultures. They're certainly later cultures.
Okay.
But there's so many different varieties of vampires. A lot of the work that I do is in the ancient Near Eastern, Eastern Mediterranean biblical worlds. And some of those entities are sort of hiding in plain sight in the text, like the Aluka, which is usually translated horribly from the Hebrew as horse leech. And in the context, it's clearly not. The Aluka was known amongst the Amorites and some of the local Semitic neighbors of the Israelites as a shape-shifting kind of vampire. That middle morpheme there, the LK morpheme, is the blood part of the word. And even some groups that have ethnonyms, like the Amalekites. The Amalekites, their name literally means the blood lickers or the blood drinkers. So there are nuggets of stuff, and that's just the Old Testament, that contain clearly vampiric elements, as part of the host of entities that peoples in the ancient Near East believed in and tried to placate. Well, here recently, I have friends that live in the Philippines. Within the last couple of years, there have been some interesting vampire sightings of a particular vampire creature in the Philippines, whose personality is a lot like Lilith, but this vampire is able to detach her torso from the lower portion of her body in order to accomplish its ends. although shape-shifting is not infrequently seen in concert with instances of vampirism, you don't usually find entities that could actually, you know, detach themselves and still function as a whole. And so, my friends in the Philippines all talk about, you know, having grown up with stories of this thing, and in some cases even having seen it. Um, so
That
yeah,
would be
there
something
definitely,
that's very disturbing to see.
yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
You know, just witnessing something like that would be traumatic, much less being the object of whatever designs that creature had on someone.
I'm also taking notes, so if I'm looking down, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just taking down some notes as well for things for me to look into later on.
Sure, I can recommend some sources too.
Please, yeah. You can recommend them.
Well, I
go ahead.
recommend them to your audience too.
Yeah.
Now, there's no shortage of popular researchers who have produced um, books and articles and things like that on vampirism, and many of them are good quality research. But there are some that I would say are the cream of the crop, um, and it may be out of print. I'm not certain, but J. Gordon Melton's Encyclopedia of Vampirism is an indispensable piece of literature for people who are interested in researching vampires. Its scope is worldwide. It covers not only the folkloric but also the literary and the cinematic. So Melton's work is really second to none. He's a religious scholar by training. Can't remember exactly which university he's attached to. I'm sure if he's alive, he's probably emeritus at this point. The other books that I would point people to would be Montague Summers' The Vampire's Kith and Kin and The Vampire in Europe. And Summers was an interesting fellow. In fact, if people subscribe to my newsletter, he's the topic of this month's newsletter.
Oh, okay.
And people can do that. People can do that for free by going to my Substack, just Dr.Judd Burton. But Summers is sort of the quintessential vampirologist. He began his life training for the ministry, and if memory serves, he was ordained as an Anglican priest, but he converted to Roman Catholicism pretty shortly thereafter. And although he retains his licensure, he spent most of the rest of his life teaching English and the classics like Latin, largely Latin. But he was an accomplished scholar. He had command of most of the modern languages of Europe and several ancient languages. And if people delve too far into his books, they'll run into his bibliography, which is just intimidating in terms of its intellectualism. But Summers is valuable because he delves into a lot of these ancient records, not just the Hebrew and Mesopotamian material, but also Greek and Roman material. And of course, the more recent folklore of continental Europe and the British Isles too. So, The Vampire's Kith and Kin is a masterwork in terms of its scope and just in encyclopedic nature. And so I teach a class on vampirology, and it is the main text. It was written almost 100 years ago. It's published in 1928. But it's, and again, although I have seen competent scholars write excellent books on vampires, I have yet to find a text, even 100 years later, that says copious in its attention to the details of the vampire. And so these three books, and certainly there are more, but these three books I would point people to.
Okay. What was Summer's first name?
Montague.
Montague. Okay. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. And the course that you offer on vampirism, is it just on that, or is it other topics as well?
No, it's sort of a world ethnology of vampires, but I teach it looking at it through the biblical lens. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons that I picked Summers, is because he does sort of, not solely, but he does look through the issue of the vampire through the lens of the Bible. But no, if people are interested in just the folkloric aspect of the vampire, they'll find a lot of material there, because it is worldwide in scope.
So, in your opinion, are vampires purely folkloric, or could they represent something paranormal or interdimensional?
No, I don't think that they're purely folkloric. I mean, that's the entrance of how those encounters are preserved, but it's also how we're able to study. It gives us the corpus of anthropological material to work out the identity and traits of the vampire. Mm-hmm. But it really only takes one of those encounters to be real, to sort of bust the paradigm on whether vampires are real or not, whether they actually are entities that interact with humans, and largely in a negative way, I would say. To my mind, they're demonic at their roots, and I'm certainly not the only vampirologist who thinks that. Summers thought this. People like Sean Manchester have argued in favor of that. And I think that there's textual reasons to believe that too. The apocryphal literature that the Old Testament alludes to in some cases, particularly works like the Book of Enoch from the Dead Sea Scrolls cache, I think provides some interesting insight. And actually, Summers was the first person I ever read that sort of brought these possibilities or potentialities to light for me. But in the first part of the Book of Enoch, there's a section called the Book of the Watchers that details the exploits of the fallen angels after they leave heaven. And you have this strange account of how they mated with human females and produced a race of giants called the Nephilim. And this sort of went outside the scope of supernatural legality as far as God was concerned, and it contributed to the reason for the deluge. I mean, you'll find familiar points with flood stories all over the world, with humanity sort of being steered away by these entities, and then the elder gods decide to send this flood, and that's exactly what you have in Genesis and Enoch. And everything is destroyed. It's a complete rewrite because of the extent of wickedness that had sprouted up on the earth. That included according to these texts, blood drinking and cannibalism.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a section in the Book of the Watchers where the patriarch Enoch who serves as a kind of judicial courier in this story, delivers the judgment of God to the Watchers and to the giants. And the giants, he tells them that their bodies will be destroyed, but their spirits will be confined to the earth, where they will essentially hamper and plague and molest humanity. And none of their appetites that they had in life, whether they were of a sexual nature or their bloodlust, none of those appetites would be gone. Well, those certainly, the sensuality and the bloodlust are traits that have been a hallmark of certain kinds of vampires. And so I think an argument could be made on the basis of text, and certainly on the basis of accounts and experience, that the vampire at its roots, after you strip the sort of literary or cinematic veneer away from it, is a demonic creature. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't have the ability to manifest physically. I think at the end of the day, most researchers who look into this and take it seriously would agree that the vampire is a preternatural creature, that it has both supernatural and physical characteristics. Or else we wouldn't have as clear a record of the vampire as we do.
Mm. Now, do you see connections between vampire lore and energy or psychic phenomena, like energy vampirism or psychic phenomena? Like, trying to see how I could word that best.
No, I think you did word it fine.
Okay.
And I do see, yeah. I mean, it's not just a matter of the vampiric entity draining physical blood, which mm-hmm. has its own. I mean, we live in the modern world, which is largely leans towards materialism, despite its philosophical shortcomings. But people the world over, for most of human history, have believed in a supernatural component of blood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the draining or taking of blood that these entities are capable of. They're certainly capable of draining physical energy, life force, whatever appellation you want to put on it. I think most of us have been around people, where after we've been around them for a while, we think, my goodness, I can only take so much of so-and-so. They just drain the life out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's probably not just hyperbole that they're doing that. There's probably some issue in their life that's allowed those entities to ensconce themselves or have some sort of presence, so that they are able to do that. So it's variously referred to as psychic vampirism, energy vampirism. But yeah, that's certainly part of the variety of kinds of vampires that exist.
When I was my late teens, early 20s, I had a friend, and I was only kind of getting into the paranormal back then, and I hadn't heard about psychic vampires, only just the mm-hmm. traditional ones. And the first time he came to the house, I opened the door, and he says, "Well, you going to invite me in or what?" I'm like, "Well, what are you, a vampire? Yes, come in." And then every time we hung out, I had to have like a 3 or 4 hour nap afterwards. I was just so drained. And then later on, I heard about psychic vampires, and I'm like, huh. It was most interesting.
Certainly.
I haven't seen him since, but yeah, it was. I firmly believe that those ones exist.
Yeah, perfect example. Yep. You come across somebody, and you instantly you instantly feel tired.
Yeah.
From the people that I've talked to over the years, and I've certainly been around people like that before. You're noticeably tired. It's like you haven't had your coffee that day or something.
Yeah.
I've had people describe it like that. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah,
Um,
it was really strange. I've met other people who I felt drained afterwards, but not like this one person. It was
mhm.
like other people, I didn't have to have a nap for a few hours, but this person every single time. And then, like I mentioned, when I learned about psychic vampires, and I'm just like, wow, that really sounds like my friend. But,
Mhm.
so
Yeah, it simply illustrates the variety of the ways that vampires can manifest. They don't necessarily have to use blood or take blood, although that's prevalent.
just very
They can
draining.
drain
Yeah,
whatever is essential to a person,
yeah.
be that blood or energy.
I jokingly say my kids were vampires because they sucked the life out of me.
Oh no.
No, they're great though. Um, how do vampires compare to other entities in paranormal or cryptozoological field? Any? Can you compare them?
Well, I think you can. I think you must, largely because the terrain, the topography, to use an analogy of
Mhm.
cryptozoology, is still being mapped out.
Yep.
Um, we've certainly got lots of anecdotal and folkloric um, data to work with, and it's valuable. It gives us a place to start. But it's the catching the cryptid in the act part that proves elusive, and that's probably by design, especially in cases of um, an entity like a vampire. Uh, Interestingly enough, vampires and werewolves have a lot of crossover. Um, Summers also wrote a book on werewolves, but I usually point people to the text that I use for my werewolf class, called The Book of the Werewolves by Savine Maringold. And I bring that up because he along with Summers and others, um, including the traditions themselves, often link werewolves and vampires. In fact, there are words in uh, the Balkans, like the Greek Vrkolikos and the Serbian Vrkoslak, that can mean both vampire or werewolf. Um, Clearly, you've got two entities here that are they're the essentially the basis for their identity is the taking of human blood. In the case of the werewolf, that can be extended to the eating of flesh. But just as the vampire, I think, qualifies as demonic at its root, I think the werewolf does too. Um, and in some instances, particularly in European and Old World vampirism and werewolfism, um, magic or alchemy is also a part of the transformation.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Either a thaumaturgic, ritual, formulaic ritual is needed, or some sort of incantation has to be. In the case of some werewolves, an unguent has to be applied to the body in order to process the change. Um, so there's certainly a precedent, and I would say a necessity for making comparisons, because there are traits that are shared. There are similar mechanisms at play in the transformation process. Uh, but I should probably say a word about, since I brought up werewolves, Summers' book on the the werewolf and lore legend is the book that Montague Summers wrote, and it's as copious as any of his other works on vampires and witchcraft. But burying gold is an interesting study because it's slightly more widespread in its readership. I found it to be as it's as scholarly as any of Summers's works, but it's a little bit more readable, I think, and it's widely available. In fact, I sell an edited copy of it at my bookstore.
Okay.
But Baring Gould is kind of an interesting fellow. He was an Anglican minister and an ethnologist and an antiquarian. So this guy wrote. People can go online and look at his catalog, and he wrote on every conceivable theological and historical topic you can imagine. But it was an encounter that he had on the continent while crossing a moor that he had been warned not to cross at night, that brought the werewolf to his attention. And he wrote this expansive book on werewolves because he believed, like Summers and myself, that the root of the werewolf was demonic. Consequently, the same year that book was published, I want to say it was 1865.
Oh, wow.
The same year that book was published, Baring Gould penned one of the most memorable Christian hymns that people have sung in churches for, almost over 150 years at this point. Baring Gould wrote the hymn "Onward, Christian Soldiers."
Oh, isn't that interesting?
And I think that it's interesting that he wrote that the same year that he published this book on werewolves. I tell my students this. I think not just because he was a minister, but because he was also a very careful ethnologist and scholar. Something must have stirred in him that it was real enough to him and real enough of a threat to humanity that he would not only write this book, but would also coin one of the most widely sung hymns in all of Christendom. I mean, I can remember singing this hymn in church routinely. I mean, multiple times a month. At any rate, to sort of bring us back to the orbit of the vampire, and your question about.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, and about in terms of your question about comparison, it's necessary to compare these entities with other entities within this growing taxonomy of cryptids that we have, because we do seem to have not only more and more instances of encounters, but a growing number of the type of cryptids.
I can't believe how many cryptids there are. My daughter bought me a book for Christmas a few years ago, and there's some of them that are so strange, just from different cultures. It's not just, Bigfoot, werewolves, that sort of thing, but there's a lot of weird ones out there.
Well, yes. I mean, just to some extent, they're all pretty high on the weirdness factor. Definitely. Or else we wouldn't classify them as cryptids.
Fair.
They're, as I say, their taxonomy is elusive.
So what was Gould's first name again?
Oh, Sabine, Sabine, Baring Gould.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bearing. And it's gold, Gold?
Gould.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
I
bearing
thought I,
hyphen. Yeah. Bearing hyphen gold.
okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the werewolf. So, do books like Book of the Werewolves, do they ever distinguish between werewolves and loup-garou, or are they pretty much the same thing?
Well, the loup-garou is a would be a type of a werewolf or were
Yeah.
creature.
Okay.
I the pastor of our church that I grew up in was from he was from Louisiana, and I became very close to that family. In fact, later on in college, I studied Greek with his brother-in-law, who was
Hmm.
also born in Louisiana, grew up in the Bayou. In fact, neither one of them spoke a word of English until they were 5 or 6. Um, they grew up in that Cajun world,
Yep.
and the rougarou was the werewolf that they grew up with, which
Yes.
of course is a slight phonetic variation of the loup-garou,
Yep.
and that makes sense because of course, Louisiana was a French colony. So
Yeah.
a lot of the lore of France would have ended up there.
I'm originally from the East Coast, and I'm of Acadian descent. So, in the
Mm-hmm.
1700s, when the Acadians got kicked out of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, they went down to the States, and yeah, the Cajuns and Acadians were cousins.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
They became the Cajuns. Yeah.
Yep. Very interesting.
I would be interested to see how much of the loup-garou folklore has survived in Canada.
I remember because I have a background and I was investigating the paranormal here in the Ottawa Valley, and we went to the Quebec side to interview a client who were having paranormal encounters in the house and on the property, and the lady told me that her husband, who was there with us, said that he was a mountain man. And I said, well, what do you mean by a mountain man? I'd never heard of that before. She says, oh yeah, his kin are all loup-garou. I'm just like, excuse me? I never got a chance to talk. Yeah, and I thought, and I can't remember her name, and I never had a chance to pursue more of that information, but that it's intrigued me ever since, because it's the first time I ever heard of that.
How fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And my family, friends, and listeners know that my very favorite cryptid is loup-garou and vampires.
Well,
so
you definitely need to read Baring Gould's work if you haven't yet.
No, I haven't.
Because he writes about the loup-garou. Because so many of the accounts that we have of werewolves actually comes from Central Europe and France.
Yep. And Germany as well?
Germany.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just a fascinating topic. So why do you think that people even today are still so intrigued by vampires? And you can have the sparkly vampires, you can have the blood drinkers, the energy drainers. Why do you think people are so they're so intrigued by the vampire?
Well, as I said, the interest or at least the fear of those kinds of entities has really never left us. It's as old as humanity. It's just in the modern age, like so many other sources of entertainment or information, we're sort of bombarded with all kinds of vampires. Like you said, you can have the sparkly vampires, you can have the classic Bela Lugosi. You can have vampires that are morally ambiguous. You can have ones that are self-loathing. You can have ones that are just wholly given over to the demonic. I think they, in a kind of Jungian sense, they're a mirror for some of humanity's darker aspirations in a lot of ways. And so the fascination with that, with the mystery of it, I think is a pull and allure to some people, to many people, in fact. But it's also kind of a dangerous lure. It's innocent enough to watch a movie about vampires, or uh, I was trying to think of a piece of vampire paraphernalia. The only thing I could think of was Count Chocula. It's innocent enough to stick the face of a vampire on a cereal box and the movies or whatnot. But I think there's a danger to going too far in making the vampire morally ambiguous, or in some cases the hero. I think the author that probably towed that line the best was probably Anne Rice. The thing that I always found interesting about her vampires was that, and you could see the struggle the most, I think, in Louis. But even vampires as debauched as Lestat, the thing about these vampires is that they knew inherently that they were monstrous. They were completely given over to it in most cases, with perhaps the exception of a vampire like Louis. But there was a kind of self-loathing that was written into a self-loathing married with the acceptance of what they were, which to me always made Rice's books interesting reading. But we've gone so far over that line now that we have, vampires that are the hero, and vampires that are can be good, or what have you. And I think that entertaining as those fictionalized accounts can be, I do think that they pose something of a danger in making something that is at its root monstrous, heroic and appealing.
Mm-hmm. They try to romanticize a lot of these creatures.
They do, and I think that I think it's not only dangerous for people, but I think that it demeans the experiences that people have had, who have suffered, who have been traumatized because of their experiences of connections, encounters with these sorts of entities. Because at the end of the day, for me, it is a very serious thing. It is a supernatural reality. I'm not saying that people should, get rid of their vampire lunchboxes and stop watching vampire movies. I watch my share of them too. But I also try to remember that, both as a scholar and as a person of faith, I think that they're an iteration of a supernatural evil that doesn't need to be lampooned or trivialized to a great degree.
Getting back to the Anne Rice books for a moment, I remember when I first read the vampire novels, and I read them from cover to cover, and nowhere in the book did it mention any names, or how they have that disclaimer, names. I can't remember how it's worded now. It's just a coincidence, like it's just fiction. I didn't see that anywhere in her books, and I thought, okay, that's weird. Is she writing fiction or nonfiction? But I don't know. I don't know about the publications now, but when I first read them years ago, they didn't have that there, and I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's, who knows? Something, she may have had an encounter in her life.
Yep.
There in Oh, and Louisiana. I mean, that part of the country is steeped in those kinds of traditions.
Hmm.
For a lot of people, they live day to day with supernaturalism. The Afro-Caribbean religions like Vodun are still have a very active presence in those places. In fact, I've got a buddy who's a curator of a museum that deals. He's an anthropologist, and they deal specifically with the artifacts from those kinds of religions that runs the length of not just the Mississippi and Louisiana, but all the way, up its concourse. There are remnants of that. But in a place like Louisiana,
Hmm.
I would not be surprised if there were private papers of Anne Rice that were found someday that point to, well, she heard this story, of a plantation owner, or um, had an encounter on her own. I would say that her own spiritual journey was quite unique in the course of her life. So who knows? But it is interesting that you bring that up, that those disclaimers weren't in the earliest publications of those books.
Yeah. They may be there now. I don't know, and I think I still have the books. But yeah, I remember reading it cover to cover, and I'm like, wait a minute. It was very interesting.
Yes, masterful writer, I think her books on the life of Jesus are kind of interesting too.
Oh, I didn't know she did that.
Oh yeah, she wrote 3 or 4 books on um, the life of Jesus. One of them was actually made into a movie. And I can't remember the name of it, of course, but it was about Jesus's early life.
Okay.
In Egypt, and then when they moved back to Nazareth.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Largely based on the apocryphal infancy gospels about Jesus' early life.
Hmm. That would be very interesting to read. I have to look that up.
Yeah, do that. Well, but
Yeah.
Rice was one of those authors. She was a captivating storyteller. Um, and again, she made a career out of pushing the moral limits of the vampire, I think.
Hmm.
But now, serious creators and movie makers push that line so far that um, it's uncomfortable for some people. I've talked to people who went to see Eggers' Nosferatu, his remake of the old F.W. Marnola classic, who were traumatized by the viewing because they had had similar experiences in their own life and couldn't believe, in their estimation, how realistic the encounters were. It's disturbing to hear.
It is.
People likening their experiences to something that they're starting to see on TV screens, or in the case of Nosferatu, the movie screen. And having watched the movie several times, it's probably the most accurate vampire movie. Now, keeping in mind it's still cinema, it's still fictive,
Mm-hmm.
but it's probably the most accurate in terms of the folkloric and the magical, alchemical side of the transformation of the vampire that has been made to date.
Yeah, I haven't. I look forward to seeing the remake of the Nosferatu. I really wish that the original was around, but I think there's bits and pieces that are missing, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that's possible. I mean, I've seen, like you can go into free streaming services right now and watch the original Nosferatu.
Oh.
Most of the edits that I've seen are largely complete, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've viewed it enough times to make that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think most of the edits that you're going to see are complete.
I'm going to have to look into that, because ever since I can remember, because like I said, when I was just a kid, I was always fascinated with vampires and Dracula, And then when I heard about Nosferatu, it's like, wow, I really, I've seen clips over the years, and it looks really fascinating. I mean, again, the cinematography for that time was pretty good.
Oh yeah, it was definitely cutting edge, and some of the people that were involved in making that had some interesting backgrounds too. Not the least of which was F.W. Murdoa, but some of the other cinematographer's name, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I want to say he was in the same lodge or a branch of the same magical order that Aleister Crowley was in. And if you pay attention to some of the scrawling that Count Orlok does in the original, I want to say that a lot of that is written out in the Enochian language that John Dee and William Kelly supposedly derived from the angelic realm. So there's definitely some high strangeness associated with that film.
It's interesting. I didn't know that. Well, Dr. Burton, we have a couple minutes left. I just want to know, before you let the audience know where they can find you, but I will also add the links into the show notes, could you touch a little bit on the classes that you offer? Is it a class that people can go at their own pace? Is it like a Zoom class?
It is self-paced. There are 6 programs that I offer through the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, and the one that will probably be of most interest to your audience is the preternatural morphology program that includes the courses on vampires and werewolves. One of my buddies dubbed it the Monsters 101 curriculum. But yeah, they're self-paced. Generally, students can finish a course within a month. There are readings. I'm constantly adding stuff to it, links to videos and lectures and things like that. So the classes have kind of become a wall that I throw things at, and whatever sticks. But I've had good response from that program in particular.
Yeah, there's a few.
And people can go to the website burtonbeyond.net and go to the Institute page to sign up for those courses.
There's quite a few courses that interest me on there as well, especially the ancient civilizations one, especially the Egypt. I've been fascinated with ancient Egypt since I was 7 years old. I'm in my late 50s now, and I have multiple Egyptian tattoos. There's just something about it that's drawn me so many years ago.
As Westerners, we're chronically interested in Egypt.
Yeah.
We're all Egyptologists at heart.
I had the great pleasure of meeting Dr. Zahi Hawass a few years ago when the King Tut exhibit came to Toronto, and they referred to him as the Egyptian rock celebrity or rock star. Yeah, but it was great meeting him. But so please, Dr. Burton, could you go ahead.
I was just going to say Hawass is an interesting figure.
Have you ever met him?
I have not.
Okay. Yeah, he's so passionate about his work. It's just So I saw the exhibit, and then I went to his lecture afterwards, and yeah, he was very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, please, Dr. Burton, could you please tell the audience where they can find you? And again, I will have the links in the show notes.
Certainly, people can go to my website at burtonbeyond.net. You can also follow me on Facebook, on X, and I also have a YouTube channel that I'm going to start adding more content to. And if people want to subscribe to the newsletter, they can subscribe to my Substack, and you'll not only get the articles that I write for Substack, but you'll get the monthly newsletter there as well.
Okay.
And as I said, this month's newsletter is on Montague Summers.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to sign up.
Excellent.
If you have a few moments, I'll say my farewells to the audience, and maybe we can just have a little chat afterwards. But thank you so very much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
A huge thank you to my special guest, Dr. Judd Burton, and to you, my wonderful haunted hearts, for tuning in. I also want to thank UPRN 107.7 New Orleans, 105.3 the Gulf Coast for carrying the show. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. It truly does mean the world to me. And if you'd like to be on the show, you have guest or topic ideas, just want to say hello, drop me an email at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd also love to hear from what country you're listening from. So until we meet again, take care of yourselves and each other. Much love to you all.